story I want to pursue. And I'd love your help.
Hey, I have an idea. Let's ask Superman about them.
I don't think he knows anything about them.
But we won't know until we talk to him. Me, you, and Superman in a room together at the same time.
We? Are you saying yes to writing this with me?
The life of a superhero is quite fleeting. Doing the obligatory heroic deeds, stopping crime in the city, taking the occasional selfie with citizens, trying to get a snoopy reporter off your back so she can't figure out your identity. Unfortunately for Clark, all of these happen to him in this episode of My Adventures with Superman. This installment opens up with Jimmy, Lois, and Clark supposedly going out jogging. But that definitely isn't the case at all, of course. He is Superman, so you can imagine how he is starting his day. Meanwhile, Jimmy wakes up to see Clark gone. Jimmy is clamoring to go on a camping trip he apparently planned with Clark. But this isn't supposed to be an ordinary camping trip. These two were going to go out to find Bigfoot. Knowing that Jimmy is into National Enquirer type thrills, this was definitely an idea of his. As for Lois, she is wrestling with her thoughts upon discovering that Clark could be Superman from the previous episode. We all know her assumption is correct, but to Lois, she has to confirm that is the case. It's just the reporter in her, and that is her goal for the entire episode. Clark doesn't help his case in this episode. Apparently, he likes to go out for bagels at the least opportune time. Also, lifting heavy boxes with weights in them certainly doesn't ward off Lois' suspicion of him. Gotta love Clark. This doesn't make too much of a difference because Lois has her mind made up as she tries to follow Superman's daily activities, with no success, by the way. Also, a mysterious figure that suspiciously has the same power as Clark is snatching up a group of villains that are out committing crimes. As for who these villains are, let's just say they serve as a plot device for the grander scheme of things. Meanwhile, Jimmy is saddled with an assignment as a volunteer photographer to Steve Lombard. Without his knowledge, Perry White, what a boss. But this is all he has for the day. Jimmy is neglected by his friends, but he refuses to acknowledge it. This has slowly been happening to him, going far as back as the second episode. But in this episode, we see that Jimmy is feeling very left out by the people he considers his friends. For instance, none of them answers his call in this episode. This is for good reason because we are taken to Lois and Superman confronting the villains of the week. And they are using the same tech that Livewire used in the premiere episode. Things are definitely starting to unravel, and we get bits and pieces of who's behind everything. Clark also sees that same recurring flashback as well. As for Jimmy, he and Steve have quite the comedic chemistry. Their scenes were quite hilarious. Also, we find out the real reason Steve brought on Jimmy to do this assignment with him. Apparently, Steve has other extracurricular activities outside of being a sports reporter for the Daily Bugle. One thing that comes from their time together is that Steve makes Jimmy realize he is the third wheel.
Me, Clark, Lois, we're best friends. The three amigos, the three musketeers!
And when you called them to help you get out of working with me, did they answer you, young D'Artagnan? Not just a handsome face, you know. I notice things. Look, you guys are tight now, but life goes on.
It's something that is kind of sad to see because in this iteration, Jimmy is a very likable character. Secondly, in the comics, Jimmy has always been a sidekick to Superman in some way. I presume that the writers will get to that aspect of the character later in the series, but for now, he's just that, the third wheel. Anyway, Superman finally ends up confronting the mysterious shadowy figure, and it was someone that was previously seen in the episodes. That, of course, being Slade Wilson in a super suit. We also see the two people he is working for. Apparently, they believe Superman is evil and want to eradicate him once and for all. The fight scene presented in this episode was well done in many ways. First of all, it presents us why the main antagonists are carrying out their diabolical plan. Secondly, it showcases Superman at his finest. Despite trying to fight for his life, he sacrifices himself to save the people in danger as the highway he's fighting next to starts to collapse. He's a true hero, the man that the people can depend on. As dangerous as this conflict is, the real confrontation is between Lois and Clark as the former is taken to her boiling point. The scene plays out in a very genuine way, as Clark is finally confronted with a decision that isn't up to him to make. Both of them laid out on the line. The main gripe that I had with this scene is that Lois is in the wrong in this situation. The writers tried to present her in the scene as someone who has been lied to, but it wasn't up to him to tell anyone his secret identity. The writers still haven't truly established Clark finding out who he truly is. He doesn't even have the answers. All of this is new to him, and for Lois to claim that he lied to her was totally selfish on her part, considering that they only truly knew each other for roughly weeks. This is just my assessment of the situation, but what does ring true is that his identity was his business and no one else's. Certainly not Lois's, that's for sure. Considering that they truly only knew each other for roughly weeks, that's just my personal assessment of the situation, but most of it rings true. Nevertheless, Clark learns the price of being a superhero. And that camping trip he and Jimmy were supposed to go on, well, Jimmy ends up going, but let's just say that Jimmy just should have stayed home instead. Because what he ends up encountering in the woods is certainly not Bigfoot. The episode finally manages to do something that was needed, and that was answering questions presented in the episodes so far. Even though it still left a few unanswered, the episode presented here signifies that they will get answered. Usually with these episodes so far, the villains have been unimportant. This episode was no different, but they were just a means to get to reveal the true masterminds behind everything. A cataclysmic event is going to happen, an event that is going to shape the episodes going forward. Also, the dynamic between Lois, Clark, and Jimmy is fractured, and if it's any indication of the end credits, it's going to continually change. The episode was thoroughly paced, with Lois and Clark being the focus, but the emotional investment is with Jimmy as we see him being left behind more and more. Lois finally gets the answers she was seeking, but at a price. Clark finally reveals himself to Lois, but at a price as well. As mentioned, Lois's reaction to finding out Clark's identity was unfair on her part and made her less sympathetic. The writers definitely leave viewers something to come back to. Now that Lois finally knows the truth and Clark has relinquished his burden of keeping his identity as Superman hidden, hopefully the series starts to push towards the events that are going to eventually happen. Also, we start to delve into why this mysterious duo want Superman dead in the first place. And of course, learning who he finally is. The time is now to start setting their sights on Superman, but first things first, they have to stop leaving Jimmy out of their circle for too long. Somebody save him. Please.
Wilson, take the shot.
No. Stand down, soldier.
General, we have an opportunity, and we need to take it.
Not if it endangers civilians. Remember why we're doing this.
And when everyone dies on the next Zero Day, will they thank you for sparing a handful now? Wilson.
Is this your operation, Mandy, or is it mine? Wilson, retreat. Be seeing you, Superman.